Hello, beautiful people. Thomas in New York. Going back to 1900. We're going to travel to 8th and 41st. Talking about an event which was the race riots of 1900. Hope all is well. Let's talk. Now, we are going into an area that was known as the Tenderloin. Now, that's right, the Tenderloin. The Tenderloin was a densely populated Manhattan neighborhood centered around the areas of near 8th and 34th to 42nd Streets. It was known for theaters, restaurants, saloons, entertainment businesses, and a large working class population. Black and white residents lived in close proximity, creating opportunities for both economic interaction and racial conflict. Now, the neighborhood had a growing black population. The competition over jobs and housing contributed to tensions between black residents and some white residents. Historians have also emphasized the importance of the area's crowded conditions back then. The poverty, the nightlife, and intense summer heat, which created an atmosphere in which conflicts could very quickly escalate. A scholarly history of the riot, which I will discuss in a few seconds here, notes that the summer of 1900 included a unusually prolonged and severe heat wave, which the Tenderloin streets remained crowded late into the night. As you know, if it was crowded back then, imagine how crowded this area is now, which you'll see it's very crowded. These circumstances did not cause racism by themselves, but one could argue that they formed part of the background in which racial stereotypes, economic competition, and distrust could turn an individual dispute into a collective violence. So we are going back now to August 13th of 1900. Robert J. Thorpe, who was a white plainclothes police officer, encountered an individual by the name of Mary Enoch, a black woman, near McBride's Saloon, which is a bar, at 41st Street and 8th Avenue. Contemporary and later accounts differ in some details, but the basic sequence is well established. Thorpe attempted to arrest Mary Enoch, and Arthur Harris intervened. So again, Robert Thorpe, plainclothes police officer, attempts to arrest Mary Enoch, who was a black woman who he attempted to arrest. Excuse me, and then Arthur Harris tried to intervene. Arthur Harris, he was a black man who recently migrated to New York. Here is a picture of Arthur Harris. According to accounts of Enoch's statements, Harris believed he was intervening to protect her from an assault. A physical confrontation followed between Harris and Thorpe. Thorpe struck Harris with his police club, and Harris stabbed Thorpe. Thorpe subsequently died from his wounds. Thorpe's death dramatically changed the situation. Instead of remaining an individual criminal case, the incident became a focus for existing racial tensions in the neighborhood. Thorpe's death led to a gathering of fellow police officers, friends, relatives, and other white residents. His body was taken to his sister's home near 37th and 9th Avenue, where people gathered to mourn him. On August 15th, tensions around the gathering erupted into widespread racial violence. The Library of Congress timeline identifies August 15th as the beginning of the major rioting, when large groups of white men began attacking black people indiscriminately. The violence continued into August 17th. Black residents were attacked in the streets and in public transportation. Historical newspaper accounts describe people being assaulted simply because they were black, regardless of whether they had any connections to Thorpe's death. The violence therefore quickly moved beyond the original dispute, and it had become a collective attack against an entire racial group. One of the most important and controversial aspects of this riot was the behavior of the police, I think. Some police officers attempted to control the crowds and protect the black residents. However, numerous contemporary accounts accused other officers of participating in the accounts or failing to protect the victims. Historian Martha Holds has described the police as sometimes joining or encouraging the violence, making the riot particularly significant as an example of violence occurring within the involvement or indifference of authorities. The accusations became an important political issue after the riot. Black community leaders and other critics argued that the police had treated black residents unfairly and that the officers responsible for violence had not been properly punished. The official police board investigation eventually reached a very different conclusion. December 8th of 1900, the Committee of Rules and Discipline of the police board released a report finding no police officers at fault. Here is a picture of the riots, one of the few that's out there. This disagreement between eyewitnesses' accounts, black activists, newspaper reports, and the official investigation is central to understanding really the historical significance of the riot. Demonstrates not only the violence itself, but also the difficulty black New Yorkers faced in obtaining official, recognition of mistreatment back in those days. The riot, had consequences beyond the immediate days of violence. I think it contributed to a growing awareness of among black New Yorkers that living in a racially mixed neighborhood did not guarantee equal protection under the law. The violence also influenced the geographic development of Manhattan's black communities. Research on the period connects the riot with the movement by some black residents away from the Tenderloin toward areas further north, areas now known as San Juan Hill, which became Harlem. This movement was part of a much larger process. During the early 20th century, Manhattan's black population continued to grow and increasingly concentrated Harlem, which eventually became one of the most important centers of African American culture, political, and intellectual life in the United States. So just a little bit more about the actual riot. Robert Van Wyck deployed roughly 700 police officers during this riot. Now, again, instead of protecting the citizens, like I mentioned, many officers actively participated in the violence. They instigated or encouraged white mobs to beat black New Yorkers. And this would be the area right here, right on that major intersection, 8th and 41st. The saloon might have been there on the right, on the left-hand side. That's where all of it happened. Now it's a major thoroughfare here, Grand Central. Well, not Grand Central, but the MTA the transit authority there. What's the word I'm looking for? Not Grand Central, but it's a major hub. Now the riot lasted, through August 16th. 60 people were injured, 35 were arrested, the vast majority of whom were black victims. Now, while there were no confirmed fatalities from the riot itself, black residents were frequently beaten while in police custody. Arthur Harris, he fled the city while, this was happening here, but was later captured, convicted of the death of Robert Thorpe, and sentenced to life in prison, where he died in 1908. Now, because of what happened, black leaders formed the Citizens Protective League, which was the CPL, September 3rd of 1900, to demand justice for police brutality. Despite widespread press coverage and explicit testimony of police misconduct, no legal action or disciplinary measures were ever taken against the officers, which I mentioned earlier. And, well, in true New York fashion, the seedy character of the Tenderloin would soon change its name, which originally referred to police corruption, fading into this, it faded. Its turbulent past was forgotten. The site of the future, now demolished Pennsylvania Station, was squarely in the middle of the district, and many residents would be converted to businesses, or they would be demolished to make way for soaring Midtown skyscrapers, as you see right there in front of you again. And again, this area changed since 1900, 126 years later. But you could argue, never forget the horrors of the Tenderloin race riot that happened here in 1900. Thomas in New York. We're at a conclusion of our story, and you wonder, have we changed? Sometimes it seems like we have changed. Other times, we might as well be back in 1900, 1800. We have to do better. I hope all is well. I'll skedaddle and bid you adieu. A honk means hello. I bid you adieu.